Please rise in body and or in spirit to sing hymn number 166, Years Are Coming, in your gray hymnal. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a beautiful day at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church, a liberal religious community where love works. I'm Abhi, Janamanchi, one of the ministers who serves this religious community, and I welcome you to worship this morning. I am so glad to see you here on this beautiful day. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, whomever you love, wherever you are from, and whatever your beliefs, life circumstance, or immigration status, you are welcome here. A special welcome to those joining our service online this morning, whether in the moment or catching up with us later. We are glad to have you with us. If you're new to Cedar Lane, and feel comfortable doing so, would you please raise your hand so we may recognize you? Welcome. Welcome. We're so glad to have you with us. And if you'd please keep your hand raised for just another moment, we have a gift for you. Our ushers are bringing the gift in gratitude for your choosing to worship with us this morning. All are invited to stay after the service to enjoy coffee, tea, bagels, and donuts, and conversation in that order. And if you choose to use a yellow mug, our members and friends will be sure to greet you. Right, friends? Yes. Indeed. In a moment, we will turn and greet one another, but before we do so, I draw your attention to the announcements page in your order of celebration. Invite us to take a moment to peruse the many wonderful things happening on campus and around this week and in upcoming weeks. And I wish to highlight a few things. First, now is the time to put your smartphones, cell phones on worship mode. And our lay pastoral visitors work closely with the ministers to support the pastoral ministry of our congregation. If you have a pastoral need or concern, Betsy Binks, our pastoral care coordinator, will be available by the Joys and Sorrows table after the service. Thank you, Betsy, for your service. Now, a number of you participated in one of 20-plus focus groups that we had all of September to basically test our readiness for the capital campaign. I want to thank you for taking time to be a part of these important conversations. And it turns out that we are ready to move forward on this. So you may have received via e-blast last Thursday from the board saying that they were recommending a $7 million campaign. Now, there will be a congregational decision made on October 29th at 12:30 here in the sanctuary. And in preparation for that meeting, which also will include an opportunity for us to endorse a congregational covenant of right relations, we're going to be having a congregational conversation in the chapel at 12:30 that will be facilitated by the Capital Assets Planning Committee. And I am told that in addition to the presentation that there will be munchies available. And since we are a food-based religion, I invite you to this conversation to affirm our commitment. And we will also have another meeting on Wednesday, October 25th at 7 p.m. to continue our conversation about the covenant of right relations. So I hope to see you there. Moving along, this Friday, we will be hosting our first Trunk or Treat, October 27th at 6:30 p.m. in the lower level parking lot. It'll be an all-ages event for Cedar Lane families and the Kensington and Bethesda community. So please let your friends know. If you're a resident in the community, invite them to bring their children, grandchildren for this wonderful event. If you're up to decorating your trunk and also having the trunk of your car, I'm sorry. You understood where I was going. You could decorate your trunk too. Sorry. I shouldn't have had that donut. That's what's causing this. Anywho, it will be wonderful to gather and welcome our families for this great harvest celebration. And speaking of harvest celebrations, our annual Falling for Cedar Lane auction is coming up in less than 2 weeks on November 4th. And all are welcome to this auction, which is our annual fundraiser, and the funds raised go towards supporting our operating fund. So we appreciate your generous support, be it through donations, which you are still welcome to make, also buying tickets, which are on sale in the lounge after the service, and also if you're able to donate food. You know, if you have a family recipe for a soup or a dessert recipe, and would like to share that with your fellow members and friends, this is a great opportunity to do that. And we have many wonderful things that are going to be featured in the auction, including this gorgeous quilt that our quilting group has put together. They donate this every year, and friends, this is the last year they're going to be doing it. So this is especially meaningful, and I want to take a moment to thank our quilting group for their many years of service and ministry. So thank you for your good work. So please stop by the lounge to know more about the auction. We're getting there, folks. We're really excited to relaunch our Soul Matters Circle conversations happening starting in November. And you will be getting an email very soon about signing up, which is open to anyone, not just members or friends, but anyone who's interested to be a part of our small group ministry program. If you're interested in being a facilitator, because we really need new facilitators, please reach out to Tim Atkins, our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, to know more about what that entails. Whew. All right. And now, today, we are sharing the plate with the Unitarian Universalist Association's United Nations office to say more about the work of the UN and also the UNO. I'd like to welcome Cedar Lane member Don Bliss to offer a brief reflection. Welcome, Don.
Well, today is UN Day at Cedar Lane, and 72 years ago, the victorious nations in World War II in San Francisco met to draft the United Nations Charter. Franklin Roosevelt was unable to deliver his opening address, which was written by the poet Archibald MacLeish, whose daughter was a member of Cedar Lane, Mimi Grimm, for many, many years. Roosevelt died a few days before the convention began. But his vision was enshrined in the Charter, whose preamble, quote, reaffirms our faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, and in the equal rights of men and women, and so on. It was Eleanor Roosevelt who was the driving force in fleshing out in detail these human rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, unanimously adopted by the UN General Assembly, a remarkable achievement for a woman in that era. From this podium last night, a letter was read from former UN Ambassador and National Security Advisor Susan Rice, recognizing the similarity between these UN values and the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, and expressing appreciation for the good work of the United Nations Office of the UUA. Shouldn't we all be grateful that our UU values have been codified in an international treaty ratified by 193 nations? And that these aspirational values and the institutions created to advance them have constituted the foundation of the post-World War II global order. Yet we live at a time when America's moral leadership is under assault at home, when the rise of nationalism and tribalism rears its ugly head around the globe, and when many countries seem regressing in protecting basic human rights. Witness the flight of 500,000 Rohingyas from Myanmar to Bangladesh, the 60 million refugees and displaced persons from Syria and Africa fleeing violence and persecution, and recent reports of the rounding up of gays in Indonesia, Egypt, Tanzania, Chechnya, Kazakhstan, and Azerbaijan. The list goes on and on. The fact is that the 193 member states of the United Nations do not always protect the rights of their citizens, and even the U.S. is not an exception to this sad fact. What then explains the UN's courageous advocacy for basic human rights? The Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zeid Hussein, have been fearless voices for the protection of minorities. For 55 years, the United Nations Office of the UUA has kept the pressure on the UN to adhere to and advance the values of its charter and the Universal Declaration. Civil society is a powerful force that keeps the United Nations on track, and there are over 1,000 such NGOs accredited by the United Nations. They've never been more necessary than they are today. Whether in the civil rights movement of the 1960s or on the global stage today, UUs have always provided much more punch, way above their weight. We share the plate today to support the UNO's work as a leader in civil society that is an essential part of the UN system, enabling the UN to deliver on its 4 commitments: peace and security, humanitarian assistance, sustainable development, and advocacy for human rights. The United Nations Office chairs the Committee on Disarmament, has been the leading advocate for LGBTQ rights at the United Nations with great effect, and has been an effective force for racial justice, climate justice, and the rights of women and migrants. The UN Charter begins, quote, "We the people of the United Nations," not we the states, not we the government, not we the presidents or kings, but we the people. It is our obligation, we the people, to ensure that the values of the United Nations and the Declaration on Human Rights are realized. The UUs, as UUs, we can do this most efficiently by our financial support for the United Nations Office in New York. With its proven track record over 55 years, we can demonstrate that as Americans, despite our current government, we support full implementation of the Paris Climate Accords, and we respect the inherent worth and dignity of every person. So please give generously when we share the plate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Don, for your testimonial and urging us to be generous in our support of the UNO's work. And now, friends, let us take a moment to turn to our immediate neighbor, to your left, right, front, and back, and welcome them.
Here we go.
Here we go again. Here we go again.
Here we are. Hey, Mary. Here we go.
Let us center ourselves. Inviting our mind, body, and spirit into this space made sacred by our presence and the presence of the Holy that is within and around, in which we live, move, breathe, and have our being, as we begin worship together with these words adapted from the Charter of the United Nations. We, the peoples of the United Nations,
determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war,
to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of all people and of nations large and small,
to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom,
and for these ends to practice tolerance and to live together in peace as good neighbors,
to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security,
to ensure that armed force shall not be used save in the common interest,
to employ international machinery in the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all people,
have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims. In service of these aims and ends, we gather in affirmation, commitment, celebration, and worship. Come, let us worship together.
As Marlene Berg comes forward to kindle our chalice, symbol of our shared faith, please rise in body and or in spirit to share the chalice lighting words printed in your order of celebration. We kindle our flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In the search for truth, may we be just. In the quest for justice, may we be loving, and in loving, may we find and live peace. Please remain as you are to sing Life Calls Us On. The words are on a separate sheet in your order of celebration.
Here in reverence now we gather for the blessings we have known, with a pledge to one another that we journey not alone. Joy and sorrow make us one.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside time to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the heart of this religious community. Our hearts are with those whose primary spiritual practice is the raising of children. We hold in our circle of caring those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental illness or addictions, and who care for family members in ill health, and for those we now name. We offer hearty congratulations to Diane and Perry Seifert, who are proud grandparents. Charles Gray Seifert was born on Saturday, October 14th, to their youngest son, Paul, and daughter-in-law, Birchie Seifert. The parents and baby are doing well. Let us take a moment to celebrate with Stephanie Williams, who successfully planned a conference for underrepresented communities in the field of physics. We offer our condolences to Joan Riggs, who experienced the sudden loss of her beloved sister, Anne Richardson, on October 8th. We hold in our hearts our former UUA moderator, Denny Davidoff, who is in hospice care at her home in Connecticut. We hold in our hearts and grieve the 300 lives lost in car bomb attacks in Mogadishu, Somalia, last Saturday. May these friends of ours, our companions in the world, and all that lives unspoken in our hearts, be held in the embrace of prayer and silence.
Let us move more deeply into this space of prayer and meditation with the words of my friend, Meadville Lombard seminarian, Molly Brewer. Spirit of life and love, Holy One that reaches wide to encompass all beings, hold us to yourself in this moment. We come to this place carrying so much on our hearts. Around us, we hear the laments of a broken world, torn by fire, gunfire, bombs, storm, and strife, crying, I too have suffered. I too have been hurt, oppressed by power, pain, by loss, and by neglect. We open our ears and lift up the words of all who join this sorrowful song, me too. Spirit, comfort us. Descend around us as a cloud of peace and compassion. Abide with us in our mourning. Help us to gather ourselves to face each day with bravery or equanimity, or even just to face it all. Help us make each moment lighter, less leaden. Give us the grace to once again give thanks and the strength to be kind to ourselves over and over. One day, may our cries of shared sorrow give way to the songs of joy. May we sing, I too am healing my broken heart. I too see the faces of justice and mercy. I too am filled with light, love, and compassion. Me too. As we enter the silence together, I invite those who are mourning the loss of a loved one or an anniversary of a loss to rise in body or spirit and to remain risen until the music begins. Let us enter the silence together. May all prayers be answered. May all hearts be restored. Amen, and blessed be.
Amen.
Nothing that is worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope.
Life flows on in endless song of birds' lamentation. I hear the real flow of him. Nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith.
Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we must be saved by love.
No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as it is from our standpoint. Therefore, we must be saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness.
Deep gratitude to our music ministry team this morning, our choir, Chris Morrow, Kevin, Jasmine, and Henry, for that powerful anthem by Brian Tate that invites and challenges us to break down these walls that we build within and around us to create a more just and peaceful world. Thank you. Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to welcome my good friend and colleague, the Reverend Eric Cherry, to our pulpit this morning. Eric serves our Unitarian Universalist Association as the Director of International Relations. He's been serving in this position since 2007, and in his role, Eric manages our Unitarian Universalist, and interfaith partnerships around the world. He also provides resources for congregations for international engagement, and in his spare time, supervises the UU Holding India program and the Unitarian Universalist United Nations office. Prior to accepting this position, Eric served congregations in Burlington, Iowa, and in Massachusetts. Easton, Massachusetts. And prior to that, Eric and I were hanging out together at Meadville Lombard Theological School, where we met in the fall of 1994.
No. We don't have to go there.
Eric, it's truly a joy and an honor to invite and have you be with us this morning. Welcome.
Thank you. Reverend Abhi, the joy and the privilege really is mine. Let me just say a word of thanks to all of the folks at Cedar Lane. You have been so welcoming and hospitable yesterday and today, and to the ministry team and staff of the church. Thank you so much for what we have been able to do together over many years, and what we will do together in the future. You know, like many of you, I really look forward to the day when the United Nations formally recognizes email inboxes that are spilling forth with far too much material as a human rights violation. Regardless, I'm going to share two of the dispatches that have come across my desk in recent days. The first was just a week or so ago, and it's so inspiring when messages like this come through. This from a woman in Cairo, a Unitarian Universalist, writing to ask for help, for assistance, for resources in establishing a Unitarian Universalist community in that challenged city. And the other was just a couple of days ago from a young seminarian studying at a non-Unitarian Universalist school in the Boston area, who had apparently just very recently come to understand the breadth of Unitarian and Unitarian Universalist faith communities around the world, of our justice work with faith and interfaith partners in various parts of the world, as well as at the United Nations. And he was writing to tell me about his excitement and how he would love to find some time to discern ways for his excitement and skill to be brought to bear to support our global Unitarian Universalist story. And now, you know, that happens every once in a while. In fact, as Reverend Abhi is reminiscing about those days in Chicago, it happened to me. And the opportunity that presented itself was to go over to our partners in Transylvania to teach English to the Unitarian seminarians there for a year. And I came back a different Unitarian Universalist, having learned something about courage, something about resilience from partners overseas. And while I'm not sure that any of the seminarians really benefited in their English language skills from the classes that they had with me, I do like to think that the transformation was mutual and that there's a strength and a courage that is shown in Transylvanian Unitarian ministry by virtue of that program and the small part that I had the privilege of playing in it. And who knows, this young seminarian writing from out of the blue might be a leader of our global UU story sometime in the near future. Indeed, I hope that he will be. I hope that all of us will find our ways into the global Unitarian Universalist story, and the courage and resilience that grows from it will be something that we all know well, especially after all of these years of war, these years of peacemaking attempts, of sanctions, of pleas, of marching, of letter writing, of electing and fasting and marching again. And after all of the investments in the essential international institutions like the United Nations that do amazing work, yet the lion and the lamb do not lie down together. The world still knows war, and a future of real peace is in doubt. After Walden and Rachel Carson and Earth Day and acid rain and electric cars and an inconvenient truth and solar panels and wind turbines and clean power plant rules and Paris and an election and a pen and a tweet destroying so much. In India, where Unitarianism has been engaged with leaders and partners for 2 centuries, the reforming influences of 19th century leaders like Ramohan Roy and steadfast Brahmos who condemned sati, widow immolation, and educated girls for the first time, confronting the injustices of caste and gender, and the work continuing with Vivekananda and Ramakrishna and Gandhi Ji and Ela Bhatt, a Holding India program leader and justice seeker, and Kathy Sridhar, who was here with us last night accepting Ambassador Susan Rice's award for the service that she provided, a true justice advocate and ally, changing the world in India and beyond. And yet, bonded labor is still so very common. And after revolts, abolitionism, a war, Reconstruction, the century of leadership from the NAACP and CORE, the Supreme Court battles and victories, the immense mobilizations and uprisings of the mid-20th century, voting rights efforts, anti-racism efforts, yet whiteness dominates today, controls, and destroys so much. Any struggle you like, the trajectory is never onward and upward forever. And I wish religion in general, and our religion in particular, taught that change that matters is slow and far harder than we'd like to think it is or expect, especially especially for those of us swimming in a culture of whiteness and white supremacy. There is a strong temptation, a tendency to believe that change happens because we want it to, that we deserve it to, that we've argued successfully for it, and that we demand it. But no. Social change that matters only happens because of long, organized, punishingly tiring, expensive struggles and commitments are made. And a religion that teaches otherwise is an obstacle. And the world can't afford for Unitarianism, Unitarian Universalism, to be that obstacle. We need to be a religion that isn't surprised when political tables turn disastrously. We need to be a religion that expects that that will happen, that knows how to appreciate the pain and suffering that result, and then rises. We need to be a religion and a religious people that isn't surprised when the United Nations can't prevent or end a war in Syria or prevent a catastrophic situation for millions of refugees. We need to be a religion, a religious people that expects this will happen, that knows that it's likely, that isn't disappointed but instead is prepared. We need to be a religion that is shocked out of sleep and into advocacy, but not surprised when gunfire erupts in Las Vegas or ICE arrests peaceful, innocent dreamers. It is a flaw. It is a fatal flaw for a religion which emphasizes the inherent worth and dignity of all people as we do, that we too easily expect that goodness will therefore rule. That is a lie. That is the danger of our tradition. It is a hiding place for the privileged when real life becomes evident. We need to be a better church than that. The real promise of our tradition lies in the potential, the possible, what human effort, what courage and resilience can make possible. This is an internal struggle and an external struggle. Both struggles matter. Both struggles are related, and our tradition teaches that they can be one. But it is not inevitable. It requires discipleship. It requires rising, which my colleague at the UUA, Reverend Jennifer Kwong, described so well with these words. He wrote, "They say that faith without works is dead. So I worked for equality next to my queer friends who wanted to get married. And I worked for religious freedom next to my Muslim friends who were accused of being terrorists. And I worked for racial justice next to my black friends whose lives were affected by police brutality. Yet, I didn't feel fully alive even after working myself to death, until I let my work become a spiritual practice, until I let go of my attachment to the outcome, until I stopped chasing after political issues one after another. I still believe faith without works is dead, but works without faith is just as lifeless. Works with faith, that is the nature of courage and resilience for Unitarian Universalists. It's the faith which rises us back up. And if you need to be called back to that courage and resilience, friends, just consider one of dozens of stories of Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists from around the world. Turn your attention to our Unitarian church in Burundi, surviving political violence that surrounds its community, meeting Sunday after Sunday and establishing our faith in the midst of unprecedented odds against it. Consider the Philippines, a Universalism and then Unitarian Universalism established in the 1950s that survived the martyrdom of its founder, Reverend Toribio Quimada, for his preferential option for the poor in the 1980s to become a strong, intergenerational, vibrant element of our faith in that part of the world. Consider Transylvania, where your partner church in Dicho San Martin will be celebrating the 450th anniversary of the Edict of Torda, the establishment of Unitarianism in that part of the world, a moment when Unitarianism confronted political authoritarianism that recognized that faith is not a gift from politicians. Faith is not a gift from anyone with authority. It is a gift from the Spirit, a gift from God, and free religious communities ought to be able to manage that gift in the ways that they see best. Consider the Czech Republic, where in the 1920s, Reverend Norbert Čapek brought Unitarianism to that city and lost his life to the Nazis in the Second World War because of his public witness. Consider the Unitarian Universalism establishing itself in Cuba. Consider the Unitarian Universalism growing up in Rwanda post-genocide. Consider the stories of courage and resilience in any part of the world, and you will find that courage and resilience gaining within yourself as well as I and so many others do. Which turns our attention back to the United Nations, the place where these many voices find a room to be in dialogue about the challenges of the day together. Our office at the United Nations in New York, as Don Bliss testified to earlier, punches above its weight on the crises and disasters that have come up in this sermon and in 100 others for LGBTQ human rights, for women's rights, for environmental justice, and innumerable other ways. That office is making a difference in the world thanks to your support, your involvement. If you're looking for another way into involvement with the UUNO, consider coming up to the seminar that takes place in Manhattan every April, or establishing an envoy relationship with the office. Those are great ways to get connected with the work that they do. And as we do, we will find that we can be the people who call out to the not yet breaking dawn with courage and hope. Can we find the strength to engage in struggles that transcend decades and generations? Can we be carried by faithful solidarity when the moral arc of the universe doesn't appear to be bending toward justice? Well, United Nations Sunday invites us to do just that, to find that courage and resilience that surrounds us, that is within us, that helps us to rise over and over again. Together with me, feel that spirit, feel the courage and resilience, and together may we bring it into this deeply hurting world. So may it be, and amen.
Eric, thank you for your powerful message, call to action on this UN Sunday, inviting us to more fully embody the promise and practice of our Unitarian Universalist faith. I think today is a special day. I think today is the first time I have encountered a UN revival service. With the music and the words, it truly feels like a revival. In these troubled and troubling times, with the challenges that we encounter both here and abroad, the work of the United Nations and the work of the United Nations office is incredibly important. This is a vehicle by which we can have our voices heard and be a part of finding solutions that invite us to be in right and loving relationships. So, my friends, our offering to both sustain the mission and ministry of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church and the work of the United Nations office will now be given and gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity.
Through the work of our lives and the work of our hands, our love is made real. May we be grateful for all that we bring and share to practice and embody beloved community. Please rise in body and/or in spirit to sing together the Fire of Commitment, hymn number 1028 in your teal hymnal.
Thank you.
remain as you are, and as you feel moved, hold the hand of your neighbor or bump elbows. As we close our time together with these words from Judy Chicago. And then all that has divided us will merge.
And then compassion will be wedded to power.
And then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind.
And then all people will be gentle.
And then all people will be strong.
And then no person will be subject to another's will.
And then all will be rich and free and varied.
And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many.
And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance.
And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old.
And then all will nourish the young.
And then all will cherish life's creatures.
And then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth.
And then everywhere will be called Eden once again.
Go in peace, go making peace, live gently, love mightily, and bow to the mystery. May it be so.
Amen.